Welcome everyone to the CEO 101 with new hires. Thanks for joining GitLab. Appreciate your conviction around the company. I hope it is everything you wanted out of it. And thanks for putting questions in advance. Harry, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, hi Sid, thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk to you. And yes, it's quite a lot in the beginning. Onboarding is quite tough, but happy to be on board. So I couldn't decide which question I want to pick, so I will ask. So I'll ask two questions. So in order to schedule information on the handbook, everybody can contribute, which is great. But how do we make sure that the information in the system stays accurate?
Yeah, that's a great question. When something becomes inaccurate, frequently it's because of a change. So what's really important is that we communicate changes via the handbook. So what we don't want to happen is like, hey, Harry, from now on, this process is like this, and you get an email or you get the information is presented in a PowerPoint. It should always be a merge request, maybe a screenshot of that merge request or a link to that merge request in an email, or maybe a presentation with a screenshot of that merge request and some extra information. But it does only change. And Tyler, thanks for muting. It does only change when you change the handbook, and also handbook first. So don't first like have the presentation communicated to everyone and say, oh, I'll document it later. Like we know from experience that doesn't happen. So it needs to be handbook first. And last but not least, don't have an unstructured page like an FAQ or just a giant list, because it's really hard to remove outdated information from that. So please have an ordering in all the information in the handbook. What? Hey, Peter, can you mute yourself? Yeah. Harry, for the second question.
Yeah, thanks for replying on that. So I have the honor to run the as area sales manager, the DACH team for the SMB customer segment. And how do you see business developing and growth? And what is your perspective for the next 1 to 3 years in the EMEA region?
Yeah, thanks for that. In our last quarterly call, we mentioned that our pipeline in EMEA has never been stronger. If you look at the usage of GitLab, it's higher in EMEA than it is in the US. And I think there's a lot of companies in EMEA that want to digitally transform, move to the cloud, get better at serving their customers through great software. So I think there's an enormous amount of potential there, and we're investing accordingly.
Thank you, Sid.
Brian.
Hi, Sid. Great to meet you, and thanks a lot for this opportunity. I thought I'd bring you the question I get most often from open source community members with whom I interact that use GitLab. They always ask me about GitLab's decision to be open core. And I was wondering if you could elaborate sort of the history of GitLab's decision to adopt an open core business model, maybe touch on whether it considered other business models that included open source, and as maybe a bonus question, director's cut or something, if you imagine a future where GitLab would be entirely open source. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that. Such a future is very unlikely, and I'll put 2 links in the chat. You can find most of it by Googling buyer-based open core. This is the best presentation I've given about it. That's on at HeavyBit, and it talks about all the other stuff we considered and which failed. This is the section of the handbook that goes into it, and for the summary. What happens if you're completely open source is that if you ask money, the only thing you're asking money for is for support. And then people need that. Well, people anticipate needing support the first time they start using the products, and they'll be subscribers for a year. And then after a year, they look back and they say, look, I didn't need the support. This is a great product. All the questions I have were already answered in the docs online. It was super easy to install and upgrade. So the only way to make money with support and to retain people is to not have great documentation and have a product that's kind of hard to upgrade where you need support to do it. That's not what we want to build. We want something that's super easy to maintain and where people can help themselves. So you got to ask money for something, and we'll ask money for features. And the features we ask money for are features that are wanted by managers and by executives. They're features whose main focus, where that individual contributors care most about, they tend to be in the open source part of the code base.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking, Joe.
Hey, Sid. So yeah, I'm looking at competitive intelligence. So I'd just be really interested to know what your opinion is of like what our approach should be with regards to GitHub's Copilot. Is it something that we're likely to work on ourselves with more AI-enabled tools, or even sort of a Copilot competitor? Or is it our position that Copilot is unethical or it's undermining the open source community? I'd be interested to know what your opinion is on the future for GitLab.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Appreciate it. So Copilot could have been called Copilot. That'd be fun. Copilot is super useful for end users. It's advanced auto completion. We are investing in that area, and we'll also have advanced autocomplete, or we anticipate having that in the future. At least we're working towards it. What you mentioned, the controversial aspect, is that they used code with kind of viral open source licenses like GPL type of licenses in training Copilot. And the question is, if you use that for training, does the license also apply to the code that is generated? I think time is going to tell. I think at GitLab we've historically given people options, so that might be the way to resolve that. But since we don't have an offering on market yet, we can wait, and time is going to hopefully sort things out more.
Thanks.
Stefan.
Hi, Sid. Stephen Walters here. So I'm very much a futurist. What is your opinion? What do you see as GitLab's greatest challenges and greatest opportunities over the next 18 months? And they don't have to be mutually exclusive. And is there a particular emerging industry trend that you see that gets you excited?
Yeah, thanks for asking. You can learn more about like our biggest risks and our biggest tailwinds, either by Googling it or looking at our S1 filing. One trend that's happening now that I think is very exciting is DevOps and model ops coming closer together. Every significant application in the future is going to have a combination of code and AI ML. And it makes sense to me that the DevOps platform and the model ops platform will converge and be the same application because they're so closely related. So I'm very excited about that. It's going to be a long trend, but I think we're going to see a lot more of that over the next 18 months in the market. And we're also working on innovation there under our. If you want to find more about that, it's a GitLab model ops is a good term to search for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for joining GitLab.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's nice to meet you. So I'm curious, what are some of the most important things we need to communicate about GitLab over the next year? Of course, I've seen the messaging document and our various documentation, but would love to hear it from you if there's anything new or different that we should communicate, particularly as we think about going head to head with some of our biggest competitors.
Yeah, I think there's 3 things come to mind. First of all, GitLab is no longer just version control or version control and CI. GitLab is a DevOps platform. It helps you all the way from planning something to monitoring the result. Second, a platform is superior to best-in-class DevOps or DIY DevOps, where you get 10 best-in-class tools and then you invest in duct taping those together. And third, there's one application that also looks like it might be a viable DevOps platform in the future, GitHub, but GitLab is way ahead of them. I think those are the 3 messages I would love to see. And those shouldn't be like, oh, GitLab is so great, but it should be, look at the value people are getting with GitLab. It should be customers who should be front and center, and the things that they have achieved with GitLab, and then the impact the champions had on their organization and their own career.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Gabby, thanks for joining GitLab.
Hello, Sid. Thank you. This was just curiosity as a follow-up to something that you mentioned in the beginning of the call about the larger use or customer base in EMEA than the Americas. I was just curious as to what do you attribute that difference to? Is it a vertical segment? Is it the size of the organization? Have we used different messaging in EMEA? I'm just being a marketeer. I was just curious about what in your mind is the attribute to that.
I'll give you my opinion, not backed by any data. GitLab is relatively recent. We only got started in 2011. We only got external investors in 2015. And the US companies were, I think, on average, so like there were European companies way ahead of most US companies, but on average, if you look at the companies, the US companies were further ahead in DevOps than the European companies. So the US companies made decisions earlier. And then when they had to choose version control, like GitLab wasn't on the market yet. So a lot of them choose GitHub. In Europe, because they on average made a decision later, we had a better shot. We got a lot more usage. Then the second factor, which I think is a smaller factor in it, is that in Europe, there was more reluctance to use a US-based SaaS service, github.com, gitlab.com. So it's more self-hosting. And relative to GitHub, GitLab was stronger in self-hosting.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Rhoda, do I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, Rhonda is my evil twin sister. I always joke. Most people say Rhonda. So thank you for that, Sid. First of all, I want you to know I came to GitLab and I was most excited about the vals, efficiency and iteration. And so as I went through new hire, I observed a number of times where it seems that certain internal teams were really struggling with scaling up, think like hamster wheel kind of activity with so many new hires and or growth in our business, think number of transactions. And so some of the internal processes are really experiencing some difficulties. What are your thoughts on how we might best be able to address this and what can we do to help?
You're totally right. You have an evil twin sister. I have
I
the
do.
bane of my existence is that I as a CMO are responsible for underinvesting in our fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
I do think we have a couple of really exciting things coming.
Mm-hmm.
One of them that's closest is cloud licensing, like having a direct connection to the customer and not like having a guess and sending license files back and forth that might or might not work. I think that's a great development. The second one is Zora orders. like being able to have the data models between Zora and our customers dot system aligned, and being able to use Zora orders for everything, so that we have a better single source of truth and a better consolidation of all those things. And then the third, really interesting for you, is eDisti, like using off-the-shelf e-commerce software to make offers and to sell on partner marketplaces and things like that. I hope that those things will really help and remove a lot of the busy work that is unfortunately needed today. I see you nodding. Liz, thanks for joining GitLab.
Thanks, Ed. I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on GitHub's recent hiring freeze, the news about that. I know that we, the larger kind of community and economic climate, people are bracing for layoffs or more freezes, but direct competitor, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how that if there are any implications for us.
It has no implications for us. We luckily don't base our strategy on what other companies are doing, but what we should be doing. We said in the last quarterly call, our pipeline in Europe was stronger than ever. We also said that we didn't see any changes in key business metrics. We're also a company that's growing strongly. Last quarter, our year-over-year revenue growth was 75%, which I believe to be significantly higher than the industry average. There might very well be an economic slowdown. I'm a macroeconomics nerd, and a slowdown would be unfortunate for many people. It's also very interesting to look at like what's happening, because this exact situation has not been there before. We saw in the last slowdown that we had, which was 2020 during COVID, we saw that the industries that were affected most, for example, global airlines, they still purchased GitLab. We closed 3 global airlines, while their revenue was down approximately 90%. So a slowdown in business makes it more important to save cost on your software bill. Well, we can do that because we can replace your best-in-class applications with a single application. Save cost on needless busy work. And the needless busy work at a lot of companies is building their own DIY DevOps, having their best engineers work on tooling instead of their company priorities. With GitLab, those can be put on the company priorities. Make everyone more effective. If your company has a hiring freeze for engineers, you want your engineers to be able to do more, because guess what? The need for building more software and making that better is not going to stop. It's only going to increase. And most importantly, move faster, reduce the cycle time. Goldman Sachs was able to go from 2 weeks to 2 hours to improve their most important application. If you can respond faster to the market, if you can move to the cloud faster and close that data center faster, you're going to come out of the recession, a possible recession, better. Now, there's no guarantees for the future, but this is where we're at currently, and we think that us and GitHub together is less than 5% of a $40 billion market. That's what we're aiming for.
Thanks.
Thanks for asking. Jesse, thanks for joining GitLab.
Hi, thank you. I'm still typing my question, so hopefully I
All good.
can just say it. Yeah, so I'm curious if you have any, general advice for us as new hires. We're all in different departments, roles, but are there any kind of like top things you think that we should make sure that we're doing, or general approaches we should be taking, or like common mistakes you see people making as they onboard to GitLab?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think onboarding remotely can feel a bit lonely. So that's the thing I want to call out. One thing to, so you got to invest in informal communication. So definitely do those coffee chats, pick people in other departments so that you build a cross-functional network at GitLab. And the 5 coffee chats we make you do is a minimum, not a maximum. So feel free to do more. I know you're busy, both onboarding and maybe already starting to work a bit, but the work can wait, especially like the work is new and it makes you feel uncomfortable because it's new and you might do something wrong, and that's stressful. So feel free to do a little bit less work and a little bit more getting to know people. Any other tips that people in the call have realized? Some of you have been here for some time now.
If I may, this is Gabby. I didn't type it, but if it's okay to say it, I was just wondering if you have an idea. One of the things that has been missing for me is knowing who is who, not just within my department, within marketing, but like if I want to know who is the head of a different department and how do I reach out to somebody for a coffee chat if I really don't know? Is there like a central location where you can find all this information?
Yeah, there should be a central org chart in Workday.
Going beyond just the org chart, I was just a little bit of like, I don't know, maybe an idea to have in the onboarding a section of the heads of different departments and put the handbook page so that you can get familiar. So beyond your immediate work, this is what other people do within GitLab. I just feel sometimes because we're so remote physically that it's hard to understand unless you go to an event where somebody goes to the stage and talks, this is what I do, this is what I want to do, and this is my asks of you. And then you start seeing the interdependencies. I'm looking for something like that.
That's interesting. I think we have in the handbook, we have a sidebar. So let me try to open this up, and I'm doing this. I don't have a fixed idea, so forgive me for.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It was just something that came to mind for me.
So this is a typical handbook page. It has a sidebar. It says maintained by Craig, which is great. I can click Craig and see like, hey, what does he do? That's helpful. But it doesn't list his role right here. So that would be interesting because then I know that he's the VP of Financial Plan, because it's not automatic that the maintainer is that. So it would be awesome if someone could also extract the role of the person and then show that next to the maintainer. And then every page should have a maintainer. So that might be another thing, but let's ask for one thing at a time. Any volunteers here who have the programming skills, or shall I ask Marshall, which is fine too?
I also have a suggestion. If you don't know who does what, you can definitely ask your team EBA. They should be helpful. A lot of us are relatively new, but you know, I should be able to point out who in the people team you could talk to about different aspects of our team or roles. So it's a good starting point and a good person to make friends with for sure.
Cool. We're at time. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for joining GitLab, everyone.